Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Journeys. Welcome to another edition of CWS Journeys. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you. We have these conversations every week because CWS Journeys is about having conversations with people about their journey in life and how they use their gifts and talents to help others. And so I like to invite people to imagine telling their stories, not only about their successes, but some of their challenges. And imagine a young person listening to you and being inspired to step beyond their challenges and limitations simply because they heard how you overcome some of your challenges. And so I'm always looking for people who have a story to tell. Our guest this evening is Dr. Shondel Nero, who is on the other side of the screen. Dr. Shondel Nero, good evening and welcome to CWS Journeys.
Good evening, Selwyn. Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. I'm just going to get into it. Let me read a little bit of your bio. Dr. Nero is Associate Professor of Language Education at the Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development, New York University. She holds a doctorate degree in Applied Linguistics from Columbia University's Teachers College and has been teaching at university level for almost 25 years. First at Long Island University, Brooklyn campus, then St. John's University, then New York since 2007. Her research examines the politics, challenges, and strategies of educating students who speak and/or write in non-standard varieties of English, world Englishes, and Creoles. Let me just go straight to the people.
That's a mouthful.
When someone asks you, who are you? What are three positive qualities that always come to mind?
Three positive qualities. First, I would say I'm an optimist. I think I mentioned I'm a traveler.
Yes.
And I'm also a planner.
A planner?
Yes.
I like that. If you weren't teaching, what other career would you like to have tried?
Well, originally I wanted to work in the Foreign Service. I liked the combination of the travel and also getting to know other cultures and engaging different people around the world. So my original interest in language was hoping to go that route, but that didn't pan out. But I probably would be doing something in the Foreign Service or something where I get to travel and meet people from different places.
So here we are, Fulbright Scholar at UE Mona campus, all of three books, including binoculars in the classroom. What can a student expect from you when they take one of your courses?
A lot of hard work. Well, one of the things for me as a teacher is I always say that I'm not interested in making clones of myself. For me, teaching is giving people the tools so that they can fly, so that they can become their best selves. So in the classroom, it's not only about teaching the content, but I want to give students tools that they can think about what they're learning, that they can question things. And yes, they do have to work hard because success entails hard work and some discipline. And hopefully when they come away from my class, they had a good experience. They learn how to ask good questions. They learn that learning never stops, that my class is just one part of a lifelong process of learning. So I want students to know that learning is lifelong.
What is most challenging for you as a teacher?
Most challenging for me as a teacher? Well, I guess it could be looked at positively and negatively. When you teach, first of all, you always have to be a learner as well. Because teaching is sort of like learning turned on its head. And the thing about teaching is you don't know who's going to be the next group of students in your class. Every semester it's a different group of students. So even if you're teaching the same course, it's a different dynamic with every group, and you don't know what to expect. And students are going to have a range of abilities. So sometimes It's hard work getting somebody from point A to point B. But that's the challenge of teaching, because you have to make adjustments to every person's level. And of course, teaching at university level, we have other, particularly since I'm a tenured faculty member, we also have research responsibilities. So balancing that teaching with research and also administrative work, that can be a challenge. But teaching is very time consuming. A lot of people see teachers having summers off, but they don't see that we have a lot of work that's not in the classroom. There's a lot of work at home, a lot of marking papers, a lot of, reading and preparation. So there's a lot of work behind the classroom that people don't see.
So you have been teaching for 25 years or more.
Yeah.
Lots of experience, lots of exposure to different personalities and characters and so on. What would you say has been or one of the most humbling experiences you've had while teaching?
Well, it's interesting, and I wrote about this in a chapter in someone's book. So when I mentioned that, you mentioned in the introduction that I taught at St. John's University, and this was very early on teaching. One night, this was a graduate school, and this student, it was a young woman, came up to me. It was a white student, and she said to me, "You're the first black professor I ever had."
Oh.
Just like that. And I remember at the moment being taken aback by the comment, actually slightly offended, or I didn't quite know what to make of it. So it was just a strange comment. So I said to her, "Really?" So I said, "Tell me about that." And she said, "Well, I grew up in New York City. I've gone through public schools. This is supposed to be the most diverse city or one of the most in the country. And I went to public school, I went to undergrad, and now I'm doing a master's, and first time I ever had a black teacher." And I remember thinking, wow, this is really interesting. So on the one hand, I'm thinking, well, is she making a judgment about me because I'm a black professor? Or what was that about? Years later, when I was writing about this in a book about being a professional of color, I realized she was just making a statement of fact. And that fact itself was like remarkable, because it really showed me how, even in this so-called diverse city, how segregated we are and how segregated the schooling system is. That you could grow up in New York City and never have a black teacher. And it doesn't matter whether you're black or white. In other words, many black students have never had black teachers either. And so it made me realize the difference of growing up. When growing up in Guyana, we were growing up in a color of majority black Indian culture where the people of color were the majority. And so that was taken for granted. So that was really a humbling moment to me about race. And I called the title of the article, The Exceptional Voice, being the quote unquote, the exception. And I was sort of punning on being the exception, which happens the higher up you go in the professional world in America, because the higher up you go, you become the one or the only or the one and only.
Was that the first time you experienced being an exception?
My exceptionality being directly put to me like that.
Like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a person of color in the professional world, you're an exception all the time. I mean, either I'm the only black professor, I'm the only female. I don't even think about it now. I mean, it's just in my department, I'm not the only black right now, but there are many situations where I'm the only female on the panel, I'm the only black on the panel, I'm the only tenured professor on the panel. There's always the only or the first or something, and that becomes par for the course in the professional world.
You are, if you don't mind me saying this, you are a gem, and
Thank you.
You have many facets, and oftentimes people get a glimpse of one or two facets and they form an opinion. So what I want to do tonight is twist this gem a little bit. So
Right.
I'm going to go back into your early timeline. Give us a glimpse of life growing up for you at ages 9 and 15.
Well, it was pretty nomadic in Guyana. My father worked in the post office, and so in the early years, every time he got transferred to a different post office, we would move with him. And when I say the early years, I'm talking the first 10 to 12 years of my life. So in the first 10 to 12 years, we lived in about 4 different places. So I was born in Georgetown, and then Dad got transferred to, the West Coast, Metro Mirzor post office. I must have been about 4 or 5 years old. Spent a year there. Then he got transferred again, so we moved to Bagotville on the West Bank. Then spent about, so when I moved to Bagotville, I must have been about about 6. Then we spent about 4 years there. Got transferred again, and we moved to Georgetown to Kitty. At that point, I passed common entrance and just started at Bishop's. And then in the 3rd year at Bishop's, he got transferred again, and then my mother said, enough. I'm not moving my kids out of schools anymore. So he got transferred to Bartica, and so when all these years we were moving around, we had a house in East Ruimveldt that was being rented out. So my mother said, I'm going to move back into the house, and Dad is going to be the one commuting and coming home on the weekends to see us. Because she's like, I'm not taking my daughter out of Bishop's High School to send her to Bartica Government School. And in the Guyanese context, you know what that means, right?
What do you remember about your parents? Well, let me be more specific. A memorable experience that you have, both of them, or not together, but
right.
either.
Wow. Well, let me just say my parents, and my dad passed away 2 years ago, but my parents were polar opposites in every way. My mother is like the ultimate optimist. My father was the ultimate pessimist. Thankfully, I'm something in between, hopefully more leaning on the optimistic side. So they were very, very different people in terms of their personalities. But what they did have in common is they were both they had a lot of good friendships. And so our house, people would always be coming over, especially because my mother was very social and always hosting people. So one of the things I saw from them is models of lifelong friendships, which to me was really, really key. So the thing that, especially for my mother, the thing that stands out for my mother is she's the ultimate people person. She's still making new friends even now, and she's going to be 80 years old in a couple of weeks. She is somebody that modeled, we talk about diversity now like it's something sexy, but she brought a wide range of people into the household, any age group, any background, any ethnicity. And so the thing I remember most growing up was just having a lot of people of all kinds of backgrounds being welcomed in the house. And so my mother didn't sort of preach openness, she lived it. And so my parents always had friends coming to the house. So I think one thing I saw from them was a model of the importance of friendship and the warmth of good friendship and being with people and really liking people as people.
If you were to eavesdrop your parents and your husband telling a stranger about you, what do you think each would say?
What they would say telling a stranger about
me? Let's start with mom.
What would my mother say about me? Well, I think she would think that I was sort of the outlier in the family. I was always the one that would be different in terms of my thinking. I would be the one. I was not a rebel by any means, but I definitely would not necessarily. I was always doing what I sort of believed in and wanted to do, without necessarily following what the others did. So I was a more independent. I would say more independent person. My husband probably would say the same thing. I'm also a talker. I definitely like talking to people. So anybody that knows me would know that I like conversation. I definitely enjoy talking to people.
And your dad?
My dad. So my dad was this. I would call him the serious one. My dad is from Buxton. So my dad was a Buxtonian in the true sense of the word.
Private Joe.
Yeah, Private Joe. He was a strong believer in education. He was very strong-minded, very opinionated person. You'll never win an argument with him. He will have the last word. But a big believer in education for everybody. I mean, this was not a case where girls or boys got more educated than girls. None of that. He was definitely a believer in education. And so in his own way, he had a strong hold on the family. He was a stickler for time. His famous line was, "To be on time is to be before time," which he got from his headmaster in Buxton.
Outside of the two, outside of your parents, who would you say had a great influence on you growing up?
I've had a lot of good friends over the years. It's hard to pinpoint one person in particular because my friends are all different. Some of them might be watching, Sonia, Jennifer, Brynmore. Those are some friends from Guyana, but I met friends when I was in Canada. I think I drew from different people's personality things that I liked. Teachers that I admired. So I can't say it's one particular person. My siblings we're all very different. So I drew from their personalities as well. So I think that for me, I kind of watch people and take notes of the things that work.
Did you have a favorite subject in school?
Oh, languages for sure.
Languages.
Yeah, I mean, I studied French and Spanish, but I got passionate about language very early.
So here we are, a teacher, a professor. What was the trigger? What led you into teaching?
Well, it was a kind of a circuitous route. I didn't start out. They always said that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. This was not a straight line at all. I mentioned that I developed a very early interest in language. I realized I was actually pretty good at it. I liked it and I wasn't too bad at it. And so I did, those tracks you have to go in high school. So I did foreign languages for O levels and A levels. And initially I thought I would work in the Foreign Service. So after I left QC, I worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs actually in Guyana for a year before going away to college. And when I worked there, the glamour that I thought the Foreign Service was not so much. And I realized there was a lot of politics in it. But then I got this great opportunity to go to Canada. And this is sort of how things end up. In Guyana, I was just applying for colleges like kind of crazy. And I applied to Canada, to Montreal, because I knew Montreal was a French-dominant city. But what really made me go there, I got accepted to the school, and the lesson is always read the fine print. The admissions letter said, you are exempted from international student tuition. And I thought, why would I be exempted? I was an international student. Well, at the time, the province was in a big political move to push French, and so anybody that was a French major, which I was exempted from international tuition. So I got my undergraduate degree for really, really cheap because I was a French major. So needless to say, I was on the next plane to Canada once I got that note. I mean, not literally, but that was the decision to go because I got a very low tuition.
How does it feel that your work appears in so many journals? How does that make you feel? I definitely feel valued. My intellectual contribution feels valued when I see my work published. Because, first of all, to get published, you have to go through a vetting process. The manuscripts are reviewed. You get some nasty comments from reviewers who are professors just like me that review the manuscripts before it's approved for publication.
And so when it's finally accepted, that's a validation that your peers or my peers in the field feel this is a worth that could be shared.
So the vetting process, and I'm sure there might be some favorable and not so favorable comments and so on. How did you deal with that?
You got to develop a thick skin because so you know the better the journal, the higher the rejection rate because that means the review it's more rigorous, so they're only taking fewer manuscripts. So when you get into a top journal and they accept it, it's really good because they're rejecting 80 to 90% of the manuscripts.
Do you remember what it was like when you realized that you were accepted?
Yeah, my first, I remember that very well. I was still doing my doctorate, and so I had a great advisor.
What was the topic?
It was on the same research, which was on Caribbean students in New York who were heavy Creolese or Creolized speakers, which is what the work is about. And their acquisition of standard English in school. What started the work was I was teaching at LIU Brooklyn at the time, and I had a young man from Guyana whose speech was heavily Creolized, and he was in what we call ESL, English as a Second Language class, because his English was so Creolized that he was treated as a non-native speaker of English. And that opened up a whole can of worms, if you will, but became my whole research. How is it that somebody from Guyana is in an English as a second language class?
You were determined.
And then I find out that many people from the Caribbean were being put in ESL classes that I had not known about. This was in the early 90s. So I started to research it. And so because of my interest in language, and I came to teaching once I was in New York and decided that I wanted a way to use my language skills. My first job here was in working at Air Canada Airlines, actually. My pre-teaching life, which a lot of people don't know. I was working at Air Canada Airlines in New York at their French desk, booking French Canadian customers using my French. And while there, I went back to school to do a master's in teaching English as a second language.
What did you find in your research that was most surprising to you?
Well, one of the things you realize is we experience the Caribbean culture very differently linguistically. So there's a kind of intuitive sense of, well, we speak English in the Caribbean, so everybody has mastery of English, or certainly standard English. That is not true at all. There were a whole host of people in the Caribbean who whose ability to write, certainly, in standardized English is far from what would be successful in school. And even more so today, part of my work in the Fulbright in Jamaica bore that out. In other words, students who are not easily able to switch from Creole to standard English in the way that more educated West Indian people can do. And that's a function of a whole lot of stuff.
Oh, because I was wondering, because I know that a lot of us who flirted with Creolese spoke English, proper English by nature, and wrote it well. So it wasn't that. It was just a certain group of people.
Yeah, but I'm saying that group, in other words, this sort of switch to standard English happens not by magic. I mean, it's a function of immersion in cultures of literacy in the home. In other words, if that exposure to standardized English is only in the classroom and nowhere else, this is not going to happen by just by osmosis. And so schooling in Guyana was very stratified. So those of us who were fortunate to have had good high school education had a certain kind of experience, but there was a whole section of the population that was not having that kind of experience and ended up like this guy in my class who grew up in the 80s in rural Berbice, did not go to school regularly, like 5 days a week, or went to school half days. And so this research exposed me to people that were having a very different lifestyle socioeconomically that did not give them opportunities at schooling and not reinforced in the home to be able to make the code switch, if you will, something very
What did your findings empower you to do?
Well, it first to work with teachers. I mean, so that's what I do now. Now I teach teachers to, first of all, because for teachers hearing Creolese, if you're an American teaching, you hear Creolese, to you it's another language.
Yeah.
To you, it's not anything related to English, or if it is, just very tangentially. So part of working with teachers is raising awareness, and that's what my doctoral work was about. How do we now take this understanding that Creole, believe it or not, actually has rules, but speakers of Creole will know that. Linguists sit around and study that. And that for students who don't have the opportunities of getting exposure to standard English, they then would need explicit support in making that transition in the classroom, especially in writing.
You mentioned